Hi everyone, welcome back to the channel. Thank you for tuning in. If you're new here, welcome. I'm Layla, the Lenormand reader, and today folks, I want to do a card combinations video. So I know that card combinations are pretty challenging for most of you starting out with Lenormand, even those of you who've been practicing for a while. And I recently ran a survey and card combinations kept coming up as the one thing that you'd like me to do videos about and talk about more. So I want to start off the year with a card combinations video, and if you've been following me on social media, you know that every so often I put up a card combination along with triplets that work with this card combination. So this year I want to try doing them as videos, and we can also follow up on them through social media and other means. So let's go ahead and get into the card combinations for the month. Okay, so let's go ahead and pick out our card combination for the coming few weeks for the month, and then we're going to do triplets as well. So I'm just going to fan out the deck and let's pick one card and let's pick our second card. Okay, and keep this aside for the time being. Okay, cross and ship. So here's our card combination for the coming few weeks. We've got the cross and ship. What does that tell us? So let's take the cards individually first. So the cross is a card that can be challenging, but it's also a spiritual card. So as a card of challenge, it points to tests, trials, tribulations, burdens, and probably tough decisions. But as a spiritual card, the cross is also associated with things like matters of destiny, so things that are destined, can be indicated when the cross comes through. So the cross can qualify surrounding cards as something that is destined, but also something that is challenging and possibly also something that we have to do. So the idea of burdens come through with the cross. So with the ship, this can be a really important trip. It can have implications on our life in a deeper sense, and it can be something that is meant to happen. This can be a trip that we are meant to take. Now, the ship doesn't always have to represent a trip. It can point to a project, some kind of journey that we need to undertake. It can also suggest that we need to be more adventurous and explore options and really go beyond our comfort zone. So the ship is really good with pushing the boundaries and, traveling, so to speak, in a metaphorical sense, outside of our boundaries a little bit. So it is a wonderful card for exploring, people, places, ideas, and just going beyond what we know. So together, this pair can suggest a destined trip, a trip that we have to take, a trip that's meant to be, and it can also represent the idea that we need to undertake a journey in the metaphorical sense. This can possibly mean that we are at crossroads. So it's not with the ship specifically, but with the road, the cross and road would mean very straightforwardly the crossroads. But because the ship is a little bit like the roads, it has to do with travel and a journey. It's possible that when we have these two together, we could be at a point of decision. And this works well with what the cross is about. So another way to read these cards or this card combination is that we are at a decision point in our journey and we have to decide in which direction we are going to sail. So this tends to be a metaphorical indication of the combination. Now, what's interesting is that because of the cross, it can either be a burdensome trip that we have to take or a difficult decision that we have to make about our journey and how we move forward, or it can be a wonderful thing, such as a happy trip or, the journey that's meant to be, whether that's physical or metaphorical. So oftentimes it helps to have more cards in the line. So we're going to go ahead and run a triplet here. So let me just fan out my deck again and let me draw out a triplet. So I'm going to place, just for the sake of the exercise, I'm going to place the card on the right hand side. Okay, so with the woman, what does this triplet tell us? We have the cross, ship, and woman. Now, this woman could be the one who undertakes this trip. But I also think that we could be traveling to meet this woman. And the reason I say that is because of the order of the cards. So it's like we are traveling to the woman. And that's usually because we read Lenormand from left to right. I'm totally open to the idea of you reading it in the other way. You know, it might depend on maybe your language. I've mentioned that in some of my books and my blog posts. But typically, I personally read from left to right. And so that's how I would read the story unfolding. So I feel that, you know, we make a decision to go see this woman. And, you know, we head towards her like that. You know, you see there's a direction in the line. The ship is about the journey, the crossing to see her, and of course it can involve a physical trip, but it can also not be a trip in the sense of traveling, you know, over water or different countries to go see her. You know, it can't just be a journey that we cross in order to meet her. And again, you know, the cards are a little bit neutral here. We're not really seeing whether it turns out positive or negative. This line is really neutral in the sense that we make a decision to travel to see this woman. So there is clearly a meeting with this person, or there needs to be some kind of communication with her. She's in the picture in one way or another. One other way to read this triplet is to consider the woman in light of our decision. So the ship is not necessarily a trip. Like we said, it can point to a journey or the idea of going beyond what we're accustomed to, going beyond our comfort zone, being a bit more adventurous in our ways. And the cross here is about this decision to do that. It can also be the crossroads that we're at, like we suggested. So in this sort of context, the woman here can mean that this is someone who helps us explore our options. She can be someone who offers us ideas. She could be someone we learn from, or she could be someone who inspires us to go beyond, you know, like what the ship suggests. So these are a few ways I would read this triplet. Now, something else to keep in mind is that anytime you interpret the cards, it matters what context you are interpreting them to. So it depends on the question. It depends on the context. If this is about the job, for example, if someone is asking you about if they're going to get a job and you get these 3 cards for them, well, the answer would be probably they will get the job, because the ship is really good with money, success. You know, it has to do with trade, buying, selling, business, and all of that, interesting projects. So it may well mean that you get the job. However, the cross would weigh that down a little bit. The cross can have a challenging impact on this. It can mean that it depends on a few things, and I feel that it would depend on this woman. So I feel that in the context of a job, on whether we get the job, it's likely that we get it, but it also depends on this woman. And there could be some kind of gathering with her. Maybe she supports, maybe we need to consult her for this. Maybe she's the person who makes the decision, right? Because of the cross and woman, right? But again, because of the ship in the middle, and often the middle card is taken as being the weightiest card for the triplet, it can point to success, albeit perhaps despite some challenges or a test. That's why I feel it can point to an interview. It's like you have to prove yourself, and then you're able to, you know, to take advantage of that opportunity. Okay, so that's in the context of the job. That's how I would read it. In another sense, let's say in relationships, I feel in relationships it would still be a bit neutral. There needs to be maybe a get together, so there needs to be going to meet this person, but it's not really clear what happens after, right? It's not really clear. It's more of an action, that there needs to be a get together with this person, that this person is traveling, that we have to travel to them. So it's pretty much the same as how we interpreted the triplets in general. Let's think of these cards in terms of money. In general, the ship is really good with money, so it can be a supportive line, a bit like how we read it for the job. The cross here can point to some decisions that we make in this regard. It can mean how we invest, because the ship can be really good with that. It can point to business transactions, and in this sense, the woman can come into the picture. Maybe she, again, supports, or some decisions depend on her. So in general, I would say it's pretty positive with money, but there are some things that need to be weighed out, a bit like the job combination or interpretation. Okay, now let's put the woman around here, for example. Would that change the meaning of the cards? It would change them slightly, I think, just slightly. It can mean that this is the woman who is making a decision about traveling. But in the context of relationships, I feel that this might point to a separation, potentially. That's because the cross can be a little bit challenging. And it is, in this case, it's the middle card. So the weight is on it, and it has that implication of challenge, burden, and having to possibly move in a different direction. So we see that the ship here is at the end of the line on the right, so it continues this way, so that's why I feel that there could be an energy of separation, and the cross being a bit challenging, it's a bit like we have to make a decision to move away, to move in a different direction. So with this order of the cards, I feel that they can be a little bit more challenging for relationships. And I think something similar can happen with the job and money, though in these contexts, the line is a bit more exciting because we seem to set out on a journey. We're adventurous, we could be taking risks. And of course, the cross might, point to some challenges here, but this is where the risk element comes through. But I feel that because the ship is on the right-hand side of the line, it can feel a bit more adventurous in the context of money and career. Okay, now let's put this card aside and let us draw another card for a second set of triplets. Let's draw this one. I'm going to stick it in the middle here. What do we get? The fox. Ooh, tricky. So obviously the fox is a tricky card. It's going to highlight anything that needs to be paid attention to, because the fox is a card that does not have transparency. The fox is associated with traps, with someone who is two-faced, and also it has some advantages like being disciplined. And interestingly enough, the fox is really good with family. And so there can be a number of things coming through, but really with the cross, which has a challenging side, the challenging aspect of the fox is more likely to come through. And then with the ship here, it can point to a tricky journey ahead. So when I see this triplet, I would be concerned about possibly an offer to do something, to engage in a project, to move in a certain direction. I also think that it can point to a wrong decision or the potential to move into the wrong decision because of the cross. So I feel that in this triplet, the fox might be asking us to consider this journey or this trip a bit more carefully. The fox here highlights possible issues coming up, popping up down the line. And so the fox would ask us to double check everything before we make a decision. So even though the fox is negative, generally, I think its advice can be helpful. It's warning, it gives us warning signs. It can also mean that we might have to turn down an offer, or that we don't get an offer, because the cross and fox can be a challenging combination. But I still feel that the fox is not necessarily disappointment, like the coffin or a heartbreak that would come through the heart and sight. Instead, I really feel that the advice of the fox is most helpful in this triplet. It warns us against possible glitches, possible issues coming up with this journey. Now, what's also interesting is that the fox is associated with work and employment. And with the ship, it can point to a project. However, I'm not inclined to see it this way, because the cross is not really exciting for this. I still think the idea of a warning can come through here best. But if I had a more positive card, like a sun or flowers, I think that might be more exciting for a project, for engaging in a certain a job maybe, or a gig that comes through. But I'm not so inclined with the cross around here. Now suppose I switch the order of the cards. Let's say we put the ship in the middle and the fox to the right hand side here. How would that change the line? Would that change the line at all? I'm not so sure. I don't think it does all that much. I think it's possible that we have to take a trip despite some challenges down the line. That is possible. Maybe that's a nuance that comes through. It can also mean the job indication might come through a bit more clearly here. I don't know, not necessarily. I'm not so convinced that this would change the order of the cards. Even if I switch them over here, for example, would that change the order of the cards? I don't think so either. Not all that much. Not all that much in my opinion. Would you read them differently? Let me know in the comments if you would read this, this order differently from my initial interpretation. Okay, so overall, I think with the fox it can become tricky, but I think the most helpful interpretation of the fox is in terms of a warning. A warning about what could come through, what could transpire, and also a suggestion to really weigh out the option and to really consider if this trip or this journey or this project that we undertake is aligned with our best interest. The thing about the fox is that it is very good with self-interest, so it is very aware of its own needs, of its priorities. And with the cross here, which is also about destiny and important things in life, that could come through as an advantage. So with the ship, I would say it's really important to prioritize the projects that matter to us, the directions that are more important than others. Maybe we will need to sacrifice some direction for another. Maybe it's important to narrow down a little bit our focus so that we can actually prioritize the journey or the direction that matters. All of this can come into play. And again, it's gonna feed back into which context is at hand, or what is specifically the question that we're trying to answer. I think with the context, it really helps guide the interpretation of the cards. Okay, let's do one more triplet. Let's set this card aside and let's draw one more card for a third triplet. I like the idea of doing 3 triplets. Okay, we've got the letter. Okay, now the letter I think is a little bit more straightforward than the fox. In this triplet, the letter is probably going to, so let's stick it here on the left. The letter is going to point to some important news. The letter is about documents, news, communication, paperwork. And so with the cross and ship, it really can be any number of suggestions. I just think that the main interpretation that's going to come through is the idea of making a decision about a trip or this project that is represented by the ship. It's also possible that the news is challenging, and that's because of the cross in the center here and next to the letter. Like we said earlier, the cross can be a challenging card. It can cause us to have to do something. It has that burdensome element to it. And so with the letter, it can mean that there is news that makes us go for this trip or makes us go in this direction. I still think, though, that the destined element of the trip can come through, so it could be for a good reason. Now, just moving the cards around a little bit, suppose we did the cross, ship, and letter. What would this mean? I do think that it can change a little bit. I think it can mean that we announce our travel because of the letter on the right-hand side. That is possible. It's also possible that news finally arrives. So the cross being challenging in the ways that we described, it can mean that it was delayed, or it was on hold, or it was depending on a certain decision, and finally the news comes through. The ship and letter both have that communication element, that travel element, and so it seems that now we receive the news. I don't think the cards change much or the indication changes much when we have the letter right in the center here. I think with the letter in the center, it's a little bit like we had the letter on the other side of the cross, in my opinion. I feel that here it's about making a decision, and the idea of documents and paperwork comes through, and then the trip ensues, or this project ensues. So these are my suggestions for the card combination meanings with the cross and ship here throughout and in the different triplets. Let me know your thoughts about these. Let me know how you would interpret the cards. I would really love to get your thoughts, and I hope this was helpful. Okay, so this was our card combinations for the month, and we're going to go over them again through social media. Let me know how you liked the video. Don't hesitate to leave me some thoughts and comments about how you'd like me to go over combinations. I'm always happy to tweak the coming videos for that so that it can help you grow your practice. And if you didn't subscribe yet, then go ahead and subscribe to my channel, and also check out the many resources that I offer for learning and mastering Lenormand. I do offer one of the few master courses, so be sure to check that out. So thank you so much for tuning in, and I'm so looking forward to our next videos together. Thank you so much for watching.